Johnny and Winona. Two names that, even decades later, still carry the magic of Hollywood's most haunting love story. Their romance wasn't just a relationship, it was a cultural moment, a perfect storm of beauty, youth, and intensity that the world couldn't look away from. And yet, like all great tragedies, it was destined not to last. The year was 1989. Johnny Depp was on the rise, moving from teen idol status on 21 Jump Street to the beginnings of a serious film career. Winona Ryder was just 17 already, capturing attention with her breakthrough in Beetlejuice. Fate introduced them at the premiere of Great Balls of Fire. One glance across the room, and according to both of them, that was it. Love at first sight. Johnny would later say it was like something out of a movie. By the time they began dating, the press couldn't get enough. They weren't just a couple. They were an image of perfection. Johnny with his dark, brooding charm. Winona with her ethereal, delicate beauty. Together, they looked like the embodiment of a Tim Burton dream. And Burton himself would eventually capture that energy on screen in Edward Scissorhands, where Johnny played the gentle outsider and Winona the girl who fell for him. What most audiences didn't know was that the emotion behind those scenes was real. It was their love story playing out in front of the cameras. Johnny was so taken with Winona that he famously got a tattoo, Wino Forever. At the time, it wasn't just ink, it was a declaration, a promise. And to the outside world it seemed unbreakable, but reality is never as perfect as it looks from the outside. Both were young, both under massive pressure, and both caught in the unforgiving spotlight of Hollywood. The breakup came in 1993. Neither of them gave the world all the details. They didn't point fingers, didn't make a scene, but the effect was devastating. Johnny would later admit that losing Winona nearly broke him, that it sent him into a spiral he struggled to climb out of. He even said that he felt his world had ended. The tattoo, once a symbol of eternal love, was altered to read Wino Forever. It became a bitter reminder of what was lost. Winona, too, carried the scars. She described that time as one of the darkest periods of her life, a heartbreak. So deep it left her questioning everything. The pain was private, but fans could feel it. The couple who once seemed untouchable had proven to be as fragile as anyone else, and yet, in the years since, their story has taken on a life of its own. For many, Johnny and Winona remain frozen in time, two impossibly beautiful young stars whose love burned too brightly to survive. Their images together still circulate, not just as nostalgia, but as symbols of a love story that felt bigger than life. What makes it even more haunting is that neither has spoken of the other with anger. In fact, both have spoken with respect, even tenderness. Winona once said Johnny was never abusive to her, standing up for him when his personal life was under fire years later. Johnny, in turn, has never hidden how important she was in his life. That kind of mutual respect, even after heartbreak, is rare in Hollywood. So why do we still talk about Johnny and Winona after more than 30 years? Because their love was a mirror of youth itself, intense, passionate, and fleeting. It was the kind of romance people dream about, the kind that seems too good to last. And when it ended, it became not just a breakup, but a story, a beautiful tragedy that still resonates. Today, both Johnny Depp and Winona Ryder have moved on, built careers, lived lives full of ups and downs. But when people look back, when they pull out old photographs of those two young stars in black leather and velvet dresses, it feels like stepping into a dream that ended too soon. Johnny and Winona may never have lasted forever, but in some strange way their love, their story and their image did. The relationship ended, the years moved on, and yet the world never let go of them. Why? Because what they shared wasn't just another Hollywood fling, it was something that felt pure, intense, and almost cinematic in its own right. Their photographs, their interviews, and even the way they looked at each other continue to echo through time. It's as if their love was captured, framed, and preserved as a piece of cultural history. When we look back now, we don't just see two celebrities. We see two people who embodied a moment that still feels alive, decades later. The beauty of Johnny and Winona's love is that it belongs to both the past and the present. Every new generation that discovers their story gets pulled. In the same way audiences did in the early 90s, they see the chemistry, the passion, and the tragedy, and they recognize something that feels timeless. It reminds us that not all romances are meant to stretch across decades. Some are like fire, bright, consuming, and fleeting. They burn so powerfully in the beginning that they can't possibly survive the weight of time, but that doesn't make them less valuable. In fact, it's their fragility that makes them unforgettable. The very fact that Johnny and Winona didn't last forever makes their love feel larger, almost mythic. Think about the tattoo, Winona Forever. It became an eternal symbol, even after it was altered. On one hand, it was a promise broken. On the other, it was a reminder of just how deeply Johnny loved. You don't carve someone's name into your skin unless you believe it will outlast everything else. And even though the words changed, the story behind that ink never really faded. It's still discussed, still written about, still dissected as if it happened yesterday. That's the strange power of their love. It lives on in memory, in art, and in the collective imagination. And then there's Edward Scissorhands. That film didn't just showcase their acting talent. It became a cinematic monument to their romance. Every glance between Johnny and Winona, every touch carried a weight beyond the script. Audiences felt it, even if they didn't know the truth behind the scenes. Watching it now feels like watching a time capsule, a record of their love. Immortalized on film, few couples have had that chance, and fewer still have managed to hold on to that emotional resonance decades later. But perhaps what makes Johnny and Winona's story so haunting is what came after. Their breakup didn't end with scandal or bitterness. It ended with silence, with heartbreak, with wounds that took years to heal. Johnny spiraled, admitting that he struggled to cope. Winona described the aftermath as one of the darkest chapters of her life, and yet neither turned against the other. They didn't trade accusations or feed the tabloids. Instead, what survived was respect, kindness, and a strange sort of loyalty that has lasted far longer than their relationship. Years later, when Johnny faced public battles and accusations, Winona stood by him. She made it clear that, in her experience, he had never been abusive, never cruel. Her words mattered because they weren't motivated by love anymore. They came from truth and memory. And Johnny, for his part, has never spoken badly of her. He continues to carry that chapter of his life with a sense of tenderness, acknowledging how important she was to him, how deeply she marked his journey. That, in itself, is rare. Hollywood romances usually end in bitterness or indifference. Theirs ended in tragedy, yes, but it also left behind a trace of grace. And so Johnny and Winona remain frozen in the public imagination, not as enemies, not as strangers, but as two people who once lived a love story so beautiful it could not survive. It is almost Shakespearean in its arc. The innocent beginning, the passionate middle, and the heartbreaking end. But unlike Shakespeare's plays, this story doesn't leave us only with despair. It leaves us with nostalgia, with wonder, with a bittersweet sense of what it means to be young and in love. That's why their story keeps coming back. It resurfaces in articles, in fan edits, in social media threads, where new generations discover their photographs and can't help but ask, what happened to them? The fascination is endless because the story itself is universal. Who hasn't loved someone so intensely it felt eternal, only to watch it slip away? Who hasn't wondered what it would be like if things had turned out differently? Johnny and Winona give that feeling a face. They make it real. More than 30 years later, the two of them have lived entire lifetimes apart. Johnny has faced battles both personal and professional. Winona has built her own career, reclaiming her place in Hollywood with a triumphant return in Stranger Things. And yet, no matter what they achieve, no matter who they love, the shadow of their shared past follows them. Not in a painful way, but in a way that continues to define a part of their legacy. Because here's the truth. Some love stories don't need to end in marriage or children or lifelong companionship to matter. Some are powerful because they are fleeting, because they remind us of how fragile love can be, how easily it can slip away, and how deeply it can still shape who we are. Johnny and Winona's love was short-lived, but its impact was eternal. It left an imprint not just on them, but on all of us who watched from the outside. In the end, their story is not about failure. It's about the kind of love that burns so brightly it leaves an afterglow long after the fire has gone out. It's about the way two people can collide, change each other forever, and then go their separate ways, carrying that connection with them silently for the rest of their lives. Johnny and Winona may never have lasted forever, but the memory of their love did. It became something larger than either of them, something that belongs to culture, to history, to everyone who has ever fallen in love too young, too deeply, too fast. And maybe that's why we still talk about them, because their story reminds us that the most beautiful romances are often the ones that cannot last, and that is why, no matter how many years pass, Johnny Depp and Winona Ryder will always remain Hollywood's most beautiful tragedy.